we're going to talk some Georgia recruiting first as they push for number 1, currently sitting at number 5. But you said on our Recruit Reaction show that you feel Georgia, as it stands right now, considering all things on the board, Georgia actually has the best shot at finishing number 1. All right, so let's start with intel on 5-star plus defensive lineman Justice Terry, probably the most important one of him and Elijah Griffin, one of the most important targets on the board. So how are things going between Georgia and Terry?
Love where Georgia stands. Think they're the clear team to beat for Autry's number 2 ranked defensive lineman. Returned to Georgia over the weekend, knows so many Georgia commits, has a great relationship with so many players in the locker room, talks to Trey Scott regularly about how he can improve as a player for his games on Friday night. He has a lot of trust in Trey Scott to get the best out of him as a player. I love the on-3 RPM prediction for Georgia. I think it's only a matter of time before he's in the class. Maybe he takes it all the way to the early signing period, but everybody is chasing Georgia for Justice Terry. It was an overnight visit to Athens. He's talked about the brotherhood in the past, how he feels at home, and I continue to like the Dogs for the Manchester High 5-star.
Yeah. Now, we got to talk flip targets in Athens. There's a bunch. Go to Dogs HQ. They have a lot more information on the weekend, but 2 major ones I want to talk to you about. We'll start with Laganza Shady Hayward. Now, he made a decision about 6 weeks ago to commit to Tennessee over Georgia, but this weekend he was back in Athens. So what are you hearing about this trip?
Well, I talked to Laganza Hayward about his latest visit to Georgia, and he said Kirby knows ball, and having him and Coach T-Rob, Travaris Robinson, possibly develop him into being the best safety he can be really stands out. He called Kirby Smart a prestigious coach and talked about some of the players that Kirby Smart has coached over the history of his career, that track record, Georgia's development. I think that Georgia is a real player in this one. He's going to be back at Tennessee this weekend for the Florida game, so the Vols looking to remind Hayward why he's so high on them. And Tennessee has led most of his process, but when he took his official visit to Georgia the first weekend of June, there was some buzz that Georgia led at that point in time. They're still trying to rally here. And we've talked about it on Inside Scoop, Recruit Reaction, and Wilt Fong Whip Around. Georgia's going to get a big flip this cycle. Maybe they'll get more than one big flip this cycle. It was KJ Bolden last year. But Laganza Hayward is someone that's on flip watch as this 2025 cycle continues.
What's this comment? He gave you a quote. Thought it was interesting. Quote, "It was a great weekend in Athens. The environment wasn't like Neyland, but it was cool."
Well, Kirby Smart
is he taking a shot? What's he saying there?
Well, I don't know how big of a factor the environment at a football stadium is going to be in his decision when he stacks it up with player development and other things. But Kirby Smart got on the Georgia fan base for the atmosphere in between the hedges on Saturday. Georgia's been as electric as any program in the country for night games in Athens at big games. And Kirby was disappointed with the way the crowd delivered. It was homecoming weekend, but certainly a lot of people say the best environment in college football is Neyland Stadium. It depends on who you talk to. Some say it's Death Valley, LSU, Saturday nights as well. But yeah, look, he still gave Tennessee's home game experience. Georgia's following that. But within that, he also pointed towards Georgia's track record of player development under Kirby Smart and what T-Rob has done historically, as well as reasons why he's high on Georgia. And talking to Hayward, talking to other people with knowledge of that recruitment, I think Georgia is a factor, and Tennessee's going to have to battle some to keep them in the fold.
Yeah, and next month Tennessee goes to Georgia, so we can probably expect him back at that game, wouldn't you think?
I don't want to speculate. I don't know what his high school schedule is, but certainly him visiting Georgia once already, he could certainly end up on their campus again.
All right, another flip target we got to talk about is FSU wide receiver commitment, CJ Wiley. And, you reported early in the week he was going to be there. There was it was unknown whether or not he would show up. He did, and you actually spoke with his father. So what are they saying about CJ Wiley's most recent visit to Georgia?
Well, he wanted to be there. He had a game on Friday. He had the SAT on Saturday morning. It still made it to Georgia for an unofficial visit for the win over Auburn. I talked to Wiley's dad, as you said, and his dad, who played his college football at LSU, a defensive lineman, said, I think anybody in their right mind would want to be a fit for Georgia. Georgia's a recent national champion. They've been dominant in the SEC all these years. Coach Smart and those guys do a great job over there. And they know so many people in the stands from other high schools, other families. They really had a great time spending time with a lot of the top recruits that were at the game. I think Georgia's the biggest threat to flip C.J. Wiley from Florida State. Talking to our colleague Rusty Manziel this morning, Georgia Tech's another program to keep an eye on. His sister plays volleyball at Georgia Tech. The elder Wiley told me they're up on the Yellow Jackets campus a ton. He's still going through his process. Florida State's going to have to battle to keep him. I think Georgia's got some momentum in that recruitment. One more flip target I wanted to mention. They had a bunch on campus, but a notable one, Josh, also talking to Rusty Manziel about it, is Anthony Crua. He's a linebacker edge from in-state Marietta. He's currently committed to North Carolina, but Glenn Schumann and Georgia really rationing things up for Anthony Crua. He's another guy to watch here late in the cycle for Georgia. It's the number 5 class in the country. But again, I am projecting them to ultimately finish number 1. Elijah Griffin's visiting next weekend, the number 1 defensive in the country. Love Georgia's position there like I do for Justice Terry. Wouldn't be surprising if Elijah Griffin committed to Georgia this coming weekend. It's his birthday. Maybe he stamps it by becoming a Bulldog.
Yeah. So speaking of defensive line shifting around with Georgia, defensive line recruiting, Stephon Shivers. How did you take his tweet on Saturday morning? He said he was reopening his recruitment, and in the same breath, he's still committed to Georgia. I see on Dogs HQ he's still on the commit list, but that sounded like a decommitment to me.
I don't have him in Georgia's class. When all said and done, he visited Vanderbilt on Saturday. I think that the Commodores will be someone to watch. Georgia's got their eye on a couple other defensive linemen. Seven Cloud is a JUCO prospect that's from the state of Georgia who was on campus this weekend. Georgia's really prioritizing him. I wouldn't be surprised if he ultimately ended up in the class. And then another Florida State commit that they're really pushing hard for is Kevin Wynn. Mm-hmm. He's been back since committing to Florida State in the summer. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's ultimately a Bulldog. There were several other talented defensive linemen that visited Georgia this weekend, guys committed elsewhere, guys uncommitted looking at other blood programs. But those are kind of the two after Justice Terry and Elijah Griffin that I know Georgia would love to have. JUCO, Seven Cloud, and then Florida State commit Kevin Wynn, who's out of Greensboro, Georgia. They already have a special couple of edge rushers committed in Isaiah Gibson and Darren Akinabong. You start adding Terry and Griffin and possibly Kevin Wynn and Seven Cloud. That's a ferocious defensive front to keep Georgia playing the caliber of defense we've been used to seeing them play under Kirby Smart.
All right. Well, I know you like Georgia to finish number 1 overall in 2025. Well, they're also doing work in 2026. They had some really talented prospects on campus this weekend, led by Jared Curtis, their top quarterback commitment. Also, number 1 offensive tackle Jackson Cantwell, he's uncommitted, and so is number 2 wide receiver Aaron Gregory. They were both on campus. What are you hearing about Georgia and some of these 2026 names?
Well, both had great visits. Talked to both Jackson Cantwell and Aaron Gregory. Cantwell loves his relationship with Stacey Searles, loves the way they develop massive offensive linemen, just the caliber of football that they play. I think Georgia, I've been saying it on numerous episodes, I think they lead for Jackson Cantwell right now. Aaron Gregory, Texas A&M's a program he's high on. Georgia also at or near the top of the list. Another great visit, just loves the brotherhood of that program. Late in the week, I predicted on 300 edge Carter Lucky to Georgia. I think he'll ultimately end up being a Bulldog. Ryan Mosley from Carrollton High is a coveted safety for the Bulldogs. Certainly think Georgia's in a great spot there. They offered an in-state linebacker, Kamari Brooks, during his visit. Coach Chidera Uzo Deripe and company turning it up for Kamari Brooks. So Georgia's certainly doing a good job there.
All right, Georgia fans, talk to us. Let us know how we're feeling after this big Auburn win. Lots of visitors on campus. More to come. Let us know how we're feeling about recruiting.